Oh my God, we're back again. Brothers, sisters, everybody sing. Hi, guys. It has been a hot minute since I have released an episode of Excuse Me, I Have Something to Say. But don't worry, because we are back. And what better way to come back than with a Halloween special for all of you? Halloween. So, as many of you guys know, Excuse Me has been on a little hiatus while I was off co hosting a side project, another podcast called The Wind Up, with my lovely friend and Excuse Me fan favorite guest, Miss Maya Crofone. And it was so much fun. And we had a blast bringing you the show. And in the wind up, we recapped every episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under season 2. And it was much fun. Did you listen?
I did, and I loved it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Highly recommend to anyone who hasn't seen it.
Go see it. Go see it, and you can see it on this YouTube channel right here for Excuse Me, I Have Something to Say, soon to be Excuse Me Productions, or you can listen to the audio over on whichever is your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for staying with me while I took a short hiatus, but Excuse Me is back. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for being patient and thanks for sticking with the show. We are coming back at you this week with the annual Halloween special. And my very special dead guest over here next to me. Some of you may recognize her as, well,
Will they recognize
will
me?
they recognize you? I don't know. With that laugh, they will. It's Rochelle Lindquist.
Hey.
Thanks for coming on the show again and again and again and again, Shell.
Thank you for having me on. I love being on Excuse Me. We always cover awesome topics. And I just, it's always a big battle of laughs for me. Anyway.
I mean, I enjoy myself. Now, you have been on a Halloween special before, the first one from season 1, where you and I got dressed up and you were Chucky.
I was. I'm all for just doing stitches as makeup. That's how I.
It's your
Halloween.
vibe.
It's my vibe.
Stitches and then new costume. And I was Shaun of the Dead.
You were.
And it was all they could throw together after being on a very, very, very strong. Well, yeah, I was a bitch was coming down hard.
Yeah, I mean that recording though.
There's demons in here.
It was funny because I was actually doing October that year. So I was having a green juice, I remember, and you were just like, I am rough today. I'm so rough. And I was like, we're going to get through it. It's going to be okay. And
yeah, I was like, I don't know what I drank. I don't know what I had, but good time. That's what I had, a good time.
You sure did.
So yes, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the Gold Coast. Before we jump into this spectacular episode, why don't you just give the listeners a little rundown what you've been up to since they last saw you on the show?
Well, Jesus, last time I was on the show, I think we talked about body positivity.
Yes.
And I was calling in from Tassie where I had moved and I was living. And that was a time. Yeah, I didn't love Tassie. It wasn't the best for me, but, back up here in Queensland now, moved back home, not home to Queensland, but like the Gold Coast is new home. And yeah, that's been super duper fun. Just doing my thing, working. And I plan on bringing my podcast back at some point. My poor listeners.
These poor soybeans. They've been left for dead.
They are shriveled up at this point, my friend. Like, I have just forgotten about my podcast. At some point, it'll be back.
She's been busy moving states a couple of times a year. That's how she rolls. So this time around, having you on the show, we are not talking about the history of Halloween, but we are talking about Halloween queens and queers, or queers and queens, depending on how you want to look at it. So we're going to take a look a little bit about the queer history of Halloween and I guess the queer screen of Halloween.
Yeah.
I guess you could call it that.
They're definitely screen queens that we can look at. There are a lot of screen queens, and definitely many queers who've been involved in horror and in the rich history of science fiction and horror and fantasy and all that great stuff that ties up to make really good stories that make us jump and make us scared and make us question things. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, before we get into it, who are you dressed as? Who are you wearing? Well, who is this piece of you? Who is this piece of you? Who is this piece?
I mean, the many different pieces, I don't personally know them. I was constructed from various, corpses. And today I am giving us some very Bride of Frankenstein 1930s realness in honor of one of the horror queens and queers that I'll be talking about in today's podcast. So very psyched to bring this one to everyone today.
And I, as a true homosexual, have basically gone, I'm going to put hair extensions in and I want to wear something pretty. And can you make my face look pretty? Okay, thank you.
And it's working for you. I'm loving this for you.
I mean, I would say...
You're giving like a Pan's Labyrinth kind of vibe.
Yes, I was going to say I was the Dark Prince, but I'll take Pan's Labyrinth. Here's my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great Halloween costume if you just aesthetic eyes. And then
just draw them on.
People are like, who are you? You're like, oh.
Just draw them on in Sharpie. It's me.
I like that. Okay. Let's take a minute before we go back to the podcast to just say, how amazing does this look? I have to say, Shaun, I came over for Hocus Pocus screening.
Ah, yes. Sisters.
And that was fucking fabulous. Yes, I'm starring in the podcast. And you did something similar where you did like all of this effort and setup, and we've got...
He's a one-trick pony.
I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of the same decorations. Okay, I feel like it's time to step up your game a little bit.
They're not even mine. These are my mother's.
That's like, yeah, okay. So I just think that you look amazing. I think you've done such an effort with all of this. Well, I'm feeling very spooky. Are you feeling spooky?
Feeling tote spooks.
Feeling spooky. Halloween!
Okay, so Halloween as we know it today has experienced many transformations over the years and is referred to by some as gay, or I like to prefer, queer Christmas.
Yes.
It's Christmassy for the gays and the queers. I don't know if you know this, but during my research, when I hit my microphone, during my research, I learned that the term gay Christmas, as it was originally coined before, I guess it was queer Christmas, it was started during the 1950s and 60s in Philadelphia, where the LGBTQ community celebrated bitches Christmas, dressing up and partying in the gay bars, following drag queens from bar to bar, and essentially creating some of America's first ever queer Halloween parades.
Oh, I love that.
Did you know
no
this?
idea. No.
No, neither did I until about 4:00 yesterday afternoon.
Love it.
So that's really, I like that. And I do like to think of Halloween as queer Christmas because all of my queer identifying friends and people I've met all are naturally drawn to Halloween. It's definitely the holiday for those who are not necessarily accepted by society.
It is. It's definitely, I think Halloween gives us the opportunity to come as you aren't, be whoever you want to be. And in a world where you're not accepted, the opportunity to be as outlandish, as outrageous, as colorful, as crazy, as intense as you want to be, it's just a wonderful gift, isn't it? I mean, you can't walk around dressed like I'm dressed today every day.
I mean, you
just,
can. I've seen people dressed worse every day. No mentioning names, as I don't know them.
Yeah, that's true, but it's more acceptable. So it's the one night where you can throw off the shackles of what is considered your appropriate presentation for your gender, your social class, all of those sorts of things, and you can adopt whatever identity is going to make you feel best. You can be as extreme in that identity as you wish. So
here's a question. I'm going off script. Going rogue.
Off script.
So one of the things that I was looking at when I was researching this is some people identifying with Halloween and that art of dressing up in fancy dressing costume and presenting yourself as something you are not potentially could be something you might actually be. And I got to say, over the years, 37 of them that I've been alive now, I've known a lot of straight men who like to dress up as women for Halloween.
Very much a thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like it creates an acceptable and safe space for people, who aren't within the queer community to explore a part of gender representation that's not open to them, that they don't feel like they can explore in day to day. And people will applaud them for it. They'll find it fun. There's nothing wrong with it when you do it that way. It's unfortunate that in our society, it needs to be an excuse. You need to have a qualifier to be able to explore your gender expression when it should just be something we're all open to explore.
And even when those, I guess, mostly straight identifying men put on a dress and they're probably having a great time, it's always laced and lined, I guess, with punch down comedy to the females that they're dressing up as.
Yes. There's definitely, I think, a misogynistic streak in some of that type of dress up that you see at Halloween with straight men doing women and doing I'm dressed as a girl for this. Oh, isn't it funny? And it as well, it's kind of a punch down towards queer people, trans people, drag queens, because to them it's funny that a man would be in a dress, but it's still something they want to explore. Yeah. And, that is a little bit sad as well. And I do think that there is that slightly touchy element to this that you do have to acknowledge within Halloween dress up when you see people, playing with gender. And we see a lot of gender swap costumes too, which is interesting as well. So people going, I'm going to go as Chucky, but as a girl, or I'm going to go as, Freddy Krueger, but like as a girl, or I'm trying to think of a guy running out.
I'm going to go as the Little Mermaid, but as a guy.
Yeah, so you see a lot of those sorts of things. And I think as long as you're doing it in the right spirit and you're not using it as like a way to sort of go, isn't it hilarious because dude in a dress, then I think that it's fine and it's a great way for you to explore that. But yeah, I do think that we do have to, I guess, just make note of that particular instance, that current of misogyny, that current of punching down that happens within those costumes.
Yeah, it does happen. And like, dude, if you want to wear a dress, just wear a dress. Yeah, it's okay. We're here for that. We love you, Chad.
Look, we know that you were dressing up as a girl and being made fun of at your school, your private boys' school where you went or whatever. Just calm down, okay? It's not a big deal. If you want to wear a dress, just wear a dress. In fact, wear a dress and continue to be a straight man if that's what you want. Clothes shouldn't have genders.
I mean, we could go real off topic. We could go real off topic here. I'm just going to say that pink was never for girls. It used to always be for boys, and blue was for girls. So
high heels were for men.
Tom Cruise, how are you? Okay, so Rochelle, what does Halloween represent or mean to you personally?
I mean, for me, I've always loved not just Halloween, but horror movies, anything spooky, anything supernatural, anything along those lines has always been of interest to me. And I think that this is a really common thread for a lot of people within the queer community, like myself, because I'm pansexual and I'm also genderqueer. So, I don't consider myself a woman. I consider myself a person, and I like to play with that, kind of representation and stuff. And I think that it's very, very common for people in the queer community to identify with Halloween, with spooky things, with horror, because I think that we are more comfortable in being uncomfortable we're more used to that experience of feeling discomfort and we're better able to handle it. I also think that all of those kind of horror stories, they speak to this lack of acceptance by society, fears from society, and that's an experience that we all know and we can talk to as well. So they speak to us. And often the monsters are quite misunderstood. If you take Frankenstein, for example, he's created against his will. When he does come to life, he doesn't want to hurt people. It happens by accident. He's not understood. He's scary looking. And he gets chased by the villagers with pitchforks. And I mean, that was an experience that queer people had.
I was just about to say, what queer person hasn't had something relating to that?
Exactly. Well, what are your feelings about how Halloween and horror as a genre resonate with the queer community? Because it's clearly a thing. Like, you talk to so many other queers, you know, queer men, queer women, queer non-binary people, just like people in the community love horror. They love Halloween, you know, and it's just a thread that you find within it. I mean, almost everyone I've spoken to who is queer was so excited that I was going to the Hocus Pocus screening. It's such a weird little, like, I don't know, indicator within, like, it's queer coding almost in our own community. It's like, it's coded queer. If you love Halloween, you just know that they might be queer.
That's true. So yeah, I think, like, for me as a little queer person, not really knowing that I was queer at the time, I just liked, I don't know, I guess you kind of resonate with particularly the creatures people have created. So, you know, we'll get on to the monsters of it all, but like, vampires are hot.
Yes.
Like, come at me, bro.
Exactly.
You know? So like there was a little queer me that was very much like, I guess, drawn to the fact that these were people living on the outside and not really fitting into society, or feeling internally that you didn't really fit into society the way that, you know, straight siblings might have, or your straight friends might have. There was something that sort of just drew me to the characters in queer horror in particular. And for me as well, I think I've mentioned it before on the podcast, that I've always been really drawn to strong females, particularly females in horror. So I guess my every gay boy's example from like the late 90s, early 2000s was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
Like, hello, Queen. Sarah Michelle Gellar did a great job, and Christy Swanson.
Yeah.
Look at that. Pulled that from somewhere. She did.
Back here in this back.
just keep it here. Here she is, guys. It's Christy Swanson.
Well, she hasn't been up to much. Where have you been? Oh,
I don't know. I always wonder when these things happen. I'm like, did she get cancelled?
I think she did. I think she was like maybe a hard right, weird Trump supporter, but I could be wrong about
allegedly.
That. Allegedly.
We know about allegedly.
We'll look into it.
The police are looking into it. Allegedly.
Don't start with me, girl. All right.
But yeah, I think a very young Shaun identified with the horror tropes and the characters and particularly the creatures, and just not fitting in. Not, you know, you're a little left of center. No one wants that, except when you get older, you realize it's the best way to be.
It really is. We got off topic. We're circling back.
Landing here. And so, Rochelle, let's talk about queer horror on the big and small screen.
Okay, well, the first person that I wanted to bring up, and it is the inspiration for today's look, okay, is Mary Shelley.
Who?
Mary Shelley.
I know.
Girl.
You're Shelley. She's a Mary Shelley over here.
I am quite Mary at the moment, and I am Shelley. But Mary Shelley is the author of Frankenstein. So she was only 18 when she wrote, like, she first came up with the idea and she told the story. And the way that the whole evening unfolded was that she and her partner, Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron, his lover, and another dude, I think it was
ding,
John.
Ding, ding. I was going to say thruple alert, but that's not a thruple.
No, they weren't. She wasn't with the other guy, but there was a thruple alert going on. So before we jump into how she wrote, you know, Frankenstein, which is amazing, I think a lot of people do know that about her. a lot of people don't realize that she is a queer icon because she was in this relationship with Percy Shelley, who was also in a relationship with Lord Byron. So they believed in free love. She was actually raised in a very non-traditional kind of household anyway. Her mother had been this raging feminist who had written this, treatise about what rights women should have before she passed away. And her father was also like a free thinker, and a lot of people consider him to be kind of the father of the anarchist movement and, the kind of like utilitarian movement. So very interesting kind of collection of parents that she had there. Her mother passed away only a few days after she's born, and terribly, because back then they didn't really know how to like appropriately care for women after birth. So they didn't realize that germs were a real thing. And her doctor stuck his hand up in her to pull out the placenta, and he gave her an infection. She passed away from the infection.
Trigger warning.
Yeah, trigger warning about that. My bad.
Shocked.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it? What's amazing about Mary Shelley is that she's kind of the queen of goths as well.
Mhm.
So she's this like weird, gothy little girl, free thinking father, obsessed with a little bit of that over here, obsessed with, like death and working through all those ideas. She used to go and read on her mother's grave and journal there. She apparently lost her virginity to Percy Shelley on her mother's
Yes,
grave.
I heard this.
Which is amazing.
I was into that.
Love that for you, Mary. And then, they end up together. I mean, their relationship's not perfect. When she runs away with him at 16, she takes her stepsister with her. And I think Percy Shelley and the stepsister had a fling too. Complicated situation.
Keep it in the family, y'all.
I mean, this is polyamory at its earliest times, really, isn't it? Like, if our listeners don't know what polyamory is, it's relationships where you can have multiple other relationships with people. And most often people see it in thruples, which is why that's constantly mentioned when it comes to Mary Shelley and Percy and Lord Byron, because it was well known that Percy Shelley and Lord Byron were bisexual and had a fling. And so they would all kind of like hang out together. They were all friends. It was later suggested that she was also bisexual, Mary Shelley, because she had these kind of ongoing long friendships with women after Percy Shelley passes away. By the way, interesting side note, she kept his calcified heart wrapped in one of his palms in her desk.
Go once, but a go once.
Dark as. And I love it. I fucking love it. So anyway, she's like only 16 when she runs away with him. And his first wife actually committed suicide. It's really sad.
Why are you laughing?
Because he's not a good dude. Like, I mean, I get the attraction and everything, but that's not a good person. I don't think the first wife was.
It's not a good Percy.
It's a bad Percy. But I don't think the first wife was really okay with like the approach that he had to relationships, and Mary Shelley was. So anyway, they run off together. When she's 18, only 18, she comes up with the idea for Frankenstein, and she's on this holiday in Geneva with Percy Shelley and with Lord Byron and with this other dude. I think his name is John Polidori, and also I think her sister Claire was there. So yeah, that's a bit of that.
They're just like these names, long names like that. And her sister Claire. Claire's here.
Claire's
hey, Claire.
there.
Has anyone seen Claire? Yeah, she's at the bar.
She's handling things. So at that same getaway, they were all kind of like, they all said to each other, come up with an idea, a scary story, and then tell each other the stories. She came up with Frankenstein. And I think it was the other guy, the John Polidori guy, that came up with a version of Vampire Tale that ended up being remarkably similar to Bram Stoker's future Dracula, which is really interesting. But obviously was not kind of like Dracula, because Bram Stoker wrote that. But yeah, she comes up with that, and it's not published until 2 years later when she's 20. And that's in 1818, and it gets published anonymously because she's afraid that people won't let her, write horror, write science fiction.
Because she has a vagina.
Exactly, because, she was a woman at that time, and she was actually scared they were going to take her children away if she did that. She actually had a terrible kind of period with children. So she got pregnant, gave birth, lost a child, got pregnant, had another one. But out of the 5 children she had, 4 of them passed away quite early on. And it's very, very sad, but it really bleeds into how she wrote Frankenstein. And Frankenstein itself is a story of not being accepted. It's a story of a man creating life, which is, not a biological, ability.
Yeah.
And back then, it was sort of talking to, in a way, this man creating for himself a life that was outside of the norm, a life where he was able to experience that feminine, ability to create life on his own. And yeah, obviously you've got to get pregnant if you're a woman, but all of those things were picked up on, and a lot of people have continued to talk about. Obviously, Frankenstein has been a play, it's been movies, it's been used as inspiration for things.
It's had sequels.
It really has. And Bride of Frankenstein, the sequel that I've done my hair from and done the whole look from,
she's a vibe.
It's amazing, because when you go back and watch that movie, when she is brought to life, there's a queer reading in how she responds to the monster. Because obviously Frankenstein is Victor Frankenstein it was originally, but in the movie it's Henry. He's actually the creator. He's the scientist. And the monster is only ever referred to, as the monster, the creation. And he creates the bride for the monster because the monster is sad and it wants companionship.
Yeah.
It wants to have,
Don't worry, dude. I'll make you a girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. And when she's brought to life, she takes one look at him and she's just like, bitch, I'm out. I'm not doing that. And
she noped herself out of that situation. Nope.
She was like, nope.
No.
And that's so interesting, because I always read that as her being queer, her being like a lesbian, and being like, fuck no, I am not touching the man. I'm not into men monsters.
See, it's funny because I never really thought of it like that. I was watching a documentary recently and I was very much like, totally see that. I just thought it was very much like, all the women independent. You know what I mean? Like, it was, for me, not being a woman and not really looking at it through the scope of, fuck, this fucker here is just like created a woman and has given it to this man and been like, here you go, this is your bride now. I saw it more of through the lens of, just like, no, you're not for me. Thank you. I will choose my own path, which is both.
And she's, agency. She has agency. She's created, and once she has life that's her own, she has agency. She chooses to not be involved. The horrifying thing about the end of that movie is that the monster goes, "We belong dead," and then he kills himself, her, and
the other guy,
scientists. Yeah,
Cy, the science guy.
The science guy. But yeah, that's like kind of a fucked up situation. So Mary Shelley is interesting as like a queer, character from horror, and also as like the mother of horror science fiction. This is well before Dracula. It's before any of these things.
Essentially created that horror science fiction.
She really did, yeah, because it didn't exist as a genre prior to that. And there's so much in how it was written that relates to her life story and, stories of the other and being outside of society. And it's a really interesting, it's an interesting piece to look at and compare and read it from that queer lens, read it from that queer coding.
Even as well, like seeing it from just a female perspective too. So like I have a lot of friends who are female who are into horror, and it's amazing how many of them, without prompt or without research, already know so much about Mary Shelley.
Yes.
Like she is an icon to people who you don't think she's an icon to. Like people are loving her.
And she is, and I think it's because we find out about her and we're like, holy shit, that's so cool.
It's so cool.
It's so cool.
It's so cool that this genre that everybody's so obsessed with, and this multi-billion-dollar industry was founded and created by this one woman, essentially.
Yeah. And, so sad too, because I don't think she really got much kudos for it in her lifetime. And I don't think that she was really well respected for what she did overall. I think she deserved more, respect for that, more kudos. But she passed away like at 52 or something. It was like a really sad situation. And she lost most of her babies. Sad for Mary. But yeah, I think you have a couple of fantastic people who are around the same vintage to talk about as well.
Yes. I feel like I've let everyone down and I haven't done as deep a dive as you have on Mary Shelley.
Because I am interested in her. So
But she is so interesting. One of the people that I wanted to, one of the Halloween queers that I wanted to talk about was Bram Stoker. So y'all might know this guy from movies like Bram Stoker's Dracula.
He was so great in that. I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. Oh, she's topping me. She's topping me, guys. Up, topping me up. Get your minds out of the gutter.
Okay, you definitely come to someone like me to top you. I mean, look at this hair. I know how to top.
So, Bram Stoker, to be honest, I think I'm more fascinated with the things he created in terms of like the story Dracula was like, this is going to be so ridiculously stupid. But when I was little, one of my favorite movies was Dracula Dead and Loving It.
I know, me too. That's because it's camp as all hell.
Oh, it's so camp. But when you actually look at Dracula, it is very camp.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
it's very homoerotic because the original
100%.
story is like Dracula. And then, there's two men that come to visit him and they're the focus, not the women. The women are part of the side story.
The women are like in there getting off with the men, and Dracula's in there. He's like, get off, he's mine.
Yeah, he is mine. It's just very homoerotic.
I know, and I love that. And I think that that's one of the things that sort of makes Bram Stoker a little bit more exciting to kind of figure out where does that come from. So correct me if I'm wrong, because you're my resident historian and horror expert, but he had some sort of demons are here. He had some sort of fascination with Oscar Wilde.
Mm.
And Oscar Wilde, very queer, very known. Like that wasn't really much of a secret. But yeah, there was just, and he was hot, by the way, yes. Bram Stoker, like that bearded. He was a bearded, lovely
daddy.
Hello, daddy.
I love a good daddy.
But I think for me, like looking at people like that, it's about finding out into their headspace that they could have gone to create such characters that represent queerness, particularly for me as a gay man, that gay subtext in horror. Like where does that come from? So Bram Stoker, he had a fascination with Walt Whitman, and he would write him letters.
And Walt Whitman was out and queer.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was rare at that time because it was still illegal to be gay.
It was illegal to be gay somewhere in Australia up until like
the 90s.
Yeah.
Good work.
See why she left? Screw you, Tasmania.
Not a fan.
And you can marry your siblings, but you can't be a homosexual. Also, that's not true, allegedly.
That's not true.
Allegedly. But yes, so he had this fascination with Walt Whitman and a very emotional sort of connection that he had with Walt Whitman, and he would write him letters, and it was just like very, very gay. And I think that definitely comes out in his work, but then he basically went, no, not gay, don't worry about that.
Yeah, it seems as though because Oscar Wilde was a friend of his.
Yes.
They were contemporaries. And after Oscar Wilde is actually charged for buggery, which is what they used to call it, in the English courts.
I used to love it when I was little, and my nana, my great grandma, used to go, oh, bugger. Ooh, and then she'd correct herself and be like, no, sorry, I didn't say that. Did you know, Nana Nancy? Nancy. It's all written there. She knew I was going to be homo.
She knew it. She knew it the whole time. But after he was convicted is when Bram Stoker has this sudden turnaround, this change of heart, where he is aggressively homophobic. He's aggressively anti-gay, anti all that kind of stuff. And people kind of review and look at Dracula as these kind of two parallels. There's obviously a lot of homoerotic stuff in there, but it seems that one of the intentions of the writing, one of the things that he goes after is this kind of tale of like, if you give in to the dark desires, because you've got Jonathan Harker being wooed by Dracula.
Ooh.
wooed. Yeah. And he has to resist the pull that he feels towards Dracula. And, if he does that, then he's more pure of heart. He's like going to be a better man. He's continues to be our protagonist. When you don't resist it, you become the shriveling, sad, pathetic Renfield, who was the man who was there before Harker, who becomes Dracula's servant. And it's this, kind of quite despicable reading of it. But I think that that's so much of that is coming from this very kind of like self-hating, like,
Yeah, it's that typical
internalized homophobia.
The toxic masculinity of the day of being like, I'm a man, Dracula's a homo, this guy's like a cock worshiper for Dracula, and where am I going to land? I want to
fair,
be.
Dracula's like a pansexual king.
Well,
He's
this is
just
true.
like, he's fucking everything.
And eating everything.
He is, yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like smothered in that toxic masculinity of, like you say, if you don't go down that path and don't taste the forbidden fruit, let me tell you, it's a banana or an eggplant. But if you don't taste the forbidden fruit, then you're going to be purer. You're going to be all of these things. You're going to be better. And then you're not going to be like old Renfield over here, who's like
pathetic, sniveling,
pathetic little cum dump. And there's nothing wrong with that either. If that's what he wants to be, that's him.
I mean, don't kink shame Renfield.
No, he loves it. Everybody loves a bit of master-slave play.
Obviously.
Welcome to Excuse Me After Dark.
Why does it always go in this direction with you and I?
It does with me and Maya too. I've got to stop having you guys on the show. Really do. I do want to touch briefly on a couple of, let's call them movie monsters, and just talk about the queer coding that is in them as a race, as a genre, as the mythology. And I wanted to start with, let's start with vampires because we're on vampires right now.
Yeah, gay as hell.
Gay as hell. Who does not want a immortal man or woman or someone in between sucking on your neck? I mean, I'm here for that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very, very gay. Also always portrayed as somewhat gay.
I don't want anyone to suck on my neck.
You don't want that?
Never.
You don't want it to stop.
Never.
Stop.
I'm just going to sit here.
He's exposing his neck cleavage. Yeah. It is gay as hell. And it's gay as hell in every which direction. There is a pansexuality to vampires. They bite women. They bite men. They bite everyone.
And blood is so taboo.
It is. And the weird virginity angle that's tied in with a lot of vampire mythology as well. You can read so much into the puritanical kind of culture that came over to America, how most of pop culture was shaped by early American cinema and stories and their approach, and how they definitely prioritize, virginity, purity, like this whole concept. And virginity is just a construct, as we all know. It's not real. And it's just interesting to look at that as well, because if vampires are pansexuality, queerness, being gay, being a lesbian, being all those things, and then they're victims and the most, pure ones and the most righteous ones and the heroes of that story are virgins, straight virgins. There's just so much in that. That's a big messed up mouthful right there.
So yeah, vampires are pretty gay. And I guess another one I wanted to bring up was Frankenstein's monster, but the trans aspect of it.
Yes, that's an interesting one to discuss.
So, yes. The wine's kicking in. So yeah, Frankenstein's monster being something that was, I guess, created with science, and trans people, I like to tread carefully here because I don't want to offend or upset anybody or come across as being terrible.
Us falls under that umbrella.
No.
Being non-binary for me is not the same as being trans, because I still identify somewhat with the gender that I was assigned. So,
and I'm just a cisgendered homo, but we do love our trans community. But yeah, there was this whole aspect where trans people can relate to the monster, and I hate calling the monster when we're talking about this because
the
creator,
the creation. The creation. We'll go with
the creation, because it was created by science, and trans people nowadays can access certain science to create the parts of themselves that they haven't been able to fully explore
and to be who they are inside, to get the outsides to match the inside.
Exactly.
Which is not something that was available to many people, that early on. And that wasn't something even that was an opportunity to explore. It's interesting because Mary Shelley actually helped two queer women friends, escape with fake passports to a different country and live together. She got them the passports. One of them lived as a man, and they lived as man and wife. So really interesting, very progressive lady. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting read, and I think there's definitely an application for that, and I can see how it would be something that appeals, to trans people. It's part of a story they can identify with. And I think that, unfortunately, in horror, while we see a lot of exploration of queer culture, there's a lot of demonization of queer culture as well. And you can see that in things like in Psycho. Let's, go back to near to the start of this. In Psycho, Anthony Perkins' character dresses up as his mother and sees himself as his mother when he's murdering people. And they made what was, something between cross-dressing, and it wasn't transgender, but it was cross-dressing, it was femme presenting. They made that, and that queer reading of it, this kind of scary thing. They made it this, evil thing. It was a part of what made him evil and bad.
What do we do with things we don't understand?
Yeah,
or things we're not really willing to truly understand.
And then you see that again in Silence of the Lambs, with Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff, it is very harmful to the community, but you can understand as well why there is such a kind of like draw for the queer community when you see such a variety of representation. And now we're starting to see more queer characters who are not being killed off in the horror movie. They're not the bad guy. I mean, to throw a couple out, you've got like the new kid in Chucky in the series who's just gay, and it's not a big part of the series. It's just a part of his character, but it's not like, oh my God, it's the only thing about your character, and we need to see more of that. In the newest Scream, the kind of recall that they did, you've got a couple of queer characters there as well, and it's nice to see that happening.
100%. Now, vampires are gay. Frankenstein's monster is an interesting read. What about werewolves?
Werewolves are interesting because they're not able to control a part of themselves, which again is a very negative reading on your queer aspect of your identity. But you can definitely see a reading of that. There's also a transformation that happens, and you can find queer readings in that as well.
And my favorite one, witches. Those old dykes that live in the wood and kill children.
Yeah, basically, right? Honestly, like, identification with a cult and with witchcraft is so common and so strong in like the lesbian and queer communities. Just like such a big thing. Hey, I don't think I've ever met a gay chick who doesn't like crystals and tarot cards. I just don't think it's ever happened. Like, they all love them.
They do. And I remember being a young queer person trying to figure out my identity and being ridiculously obsessed with movies like The Craft and that sort of thing. Yeah. And, did I play light as a feather, stiff as a board?
100%.
Of course I did. Did I want to be?
Like,
all right, let's move all of this.
Let's go.
But yeah, definitely something about the witches, I think, which really resonates with the queer community across the board.
Absolutely.
Demon.
demon child.
Demon child.
I think with witchcraft as well, there's a strong association with sisterhood, with locking men out of the experience. Like it's just, women together. And I'm not saying that like queer men can't identify with it because they obviously do as well. But it's being outside of the norm and it's embracing divine feminine power, dark feminine power. And, covens sound like the gayest thing to me. Sounds like a bunch of lesbians getting together and enjoying themselves. I think a little bit of that happens too. But I mean, I'm not trying to defend it. What I'm just saying is that there's elements of that to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we identify with it. That's why we're like, oh, I get it. I get that. I want to be a part of that. I want to be around like-minded people who are different from the norm and who get what I get and they have the same want that I have, for agency and for power because we are a empowered group overall.
What are some Halloween must watch movies or shows for you and some must traditions that you do every year?
Love that. So I always enjoy carving a pumpkin. Wasn't something that we did in Australia until quite recently. But there are actually specifically a lot of farmers who are in the northern part of Queensland, a lot of Indigenous and First Nation farmers who are doing the Halloween pumpkins as like their main crop.
I feel like I haven't seen any in the shops this year.
They are in the shops.
They're there now. Yeah. I better go get one.
And I keep thinking about buying one, but it's a little bit early because if I buy it now, it won't still be good in a few weeks.
But they go really quick. That's the problem.
Yeah. So I think carving a pumpkin has become a tradition for me. I always love to watch, like, leading up to Halloween, I will watch all Halloween-themed episodes of things because it's so fun. So Treehouse of Horror is definitely going on. Buffy-themed episodes are going on, like Buffy Halloween ones.
Was Hush a Halloween episode? Because that is my scariest episode. Like, I will watch that at Halloween.
The same season did have a Halloween-themed episode, Fear itself. So they go into the frat house.
Oh, where Anya is the bunny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then they get up to the top and then the actual demon's like this. It's just like such a great idea. But I'm here for all of those Halloween themed things because I think they're a heap of fun. I always watch Halloween and, I like to watch some of the Friday the 13th and some of the Nightmares because I feel like your classic slashers are good. I like to watch histories of Halloween and documentaries about Halloween coming up to Halloween time because I just enjoy them. Traditions-wise, I like to dress up. I love to have a party. When I was younger, I used to go to a lot. I'm having a party this year and I'm so excited about it.
I'm going.
It's going to be so much fun.
I'm going to the party. I got invited.
But I've got a different dress.
This is not going to be my costume.
No,
wait until you see what Betty and I are coming as.
Ooh, have you picked?
Yeah, it's good.
My God,
is it a couple's costume? It might be.
Oh my God, I'm so jelly. Daniel's not doing a couple's costume with me this year.
Damn you, Dan.
I know, what a joke. Honestly, I kind of wish that we had kids trick-or-treating in our apartment block. I doubt there will be because I bought a ton of candies for giving away.
Candies! We'll just haul ass. We'll move your party to my mum's house because she gets so many trick-or-treaters every year.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, I mean, all of those things, like all of your theme stuff, some of your classic movies, I think all of that helps get you in the mood. And tradition-wise, carving a pumpkin, dressing up, having at least one party, doing a little house decoration, all of those things are good fun. Yeah, so a bit of that. What about you? What do you do?
So this year's been a big year already for Halloween because every year, without fail, I watch Hocus Pocus at least once. And of course, we had Hocus Pocus 2 come out. Hocus Pocus 2, we did the screening here at my house. So much fun. Love that there is a new Hocus Pocus in the world. So that will now become another Halloween tradition. Carving a pumpkin, something I love. I try to get my stepkids involved in Halloween where I can because it's not necessarily a holiday that they have been brought up experiencing. And it's one that I remember from being a little kid, mum taking me out trick-or-treating and a girl from school when I was in primary school came over and mum was like using flour and water and things to create fake prosthetic witchy noses on all the kids.
Cool.
So Halloween's always a big thing for us.
So your mom sounds so awesome. And
oh my God, she's so cool.
Friend.
You can be her friend.
Yeah, I'd like to be a friend. So
she's so cool. And then just to top off the Halloween things, this didn't actually happen, but my sister's due date when she was having her baby was Halloween. He came late. Thank you very much, Adam. But he was supposed to be a Halloween baby. So Halloween's just like, I live for it. I'm so excited to do lots of Halloween things. But yeah, carving a pumpkin, got to do that. Although people are saying this year, carve a pineapple.
Oh yeah, why a pineapple?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's to do with the people who grow the pineapples here in Queensland. I think they have crops that they can't get rid of and the crops are going to be ruined. Okay. Right. So they're saying carve a pineapple instead of or as well.
Both. Let's do both then.
Let's do both.
Do it all.
We can do it all. Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's our little Halloween special. Just
horrors and queers and Halloween and Queens. Love it.
Yes, that has been the first episode back of Excuse Me. It's been quite a break. I've been very busy, so I'm very sorry. But there'll be a few more episodes to come to wrap up season 3 of Excuse Me. Don't forget that Miss Rochelle Lindquist here will be coming back at some point, sometime in the next foreseeable future, whatever that looks like, with her podcast May Contain Traces of Soy, which is amazing. And you guys should go listen to it. Anybody who is interested or curious about a vegan, low-waste lifestyle, this is the bitch for you.
This bitch right here.
This bitch. I love that for you. I
love that for me too.
But that has been it. Thank you so much, Shell, for coming back on the show. And don't forget, people, if you want to follow this wonderful, wacky creature over here, where can they follow you, Rochelle?
You guys can find me on Instagram. You can find my personal account at Suddenly Shelley, like Suddenly Seymour from Little Shop of Horrors.
Of course it is.
And you can also find the podcast account, which is at May Contain Traces of Soy. You can find the podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. We're going to drop links in the show notes. I have got a YouTube channel where I've done a couple of things too. Although I really left that. Like, I started it and then I ignored it, like I do with so many of my projects. And yeah, you can also go follow my professional account, which is at Rochelle Hope Creator. I don't even know anymore. We'll drop the links. Let's just do that.
We'll drop all the links. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for sticking with me while I was on my break and doing the wind up. Don't forget that you can follow the wind up on Instagram at @thewindup_pod, and you can follow this podcast on Instagram as well at excuseme_pod. Excuse Me Productions will be coming at you very soon with more content. And thanks for tuning in. It's been swell, but the swelling's gone down.
Not so horny anymore. Okay, it's been fun, guys.
Bye.
Bye.